There's a Twitter account called Saint Bill Snyder. They made an unfortunate tweet earlier this week, but in the end, they offered up quite possibly the most tasty postcast meal of all time. We're going to do it right now, folks. This is a beefy 5-layer burrito, and this is a BYU postcast as BYU trounces the Kansas State Wildcats.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view or listen of the day, and a big thank you to all of you once again who are everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. You know what? I'm not sure I want to keep rolling with this podcast. I just want to eat the 5-layer burrito here, but what a win, everybody. What a W for the BYU Cougars. They are now 4-0 on the season. They're 1-0 in the Big 12, and I'm expecting if they're not inside the top 25, they're knocking right there on the door. They deserve to be a top 25 squad at this point, in my opinion. And what do we have? Honestly, what do we have in this BYU team? Honestly, I don't know what to make of this squad quite yet. We're looking at a generational type defense with Jay Hill at the helm, and he is calling just absolute masterclass defensive games so far. Against the two Power 4 teams that BYU has played this season, speaking of SMU, and in this game, Kansas State, the opposition has, count them, 9 field goals, 0 touchdowns. Absolutely remarkable stuff, what we're seeing from BYU. More importantly, through 4 games, for the first time that BYU can see in all their historical records, the Cougars have not allowed a passing touchdown through 4 games. If you will recall, the 2 touchdowns that Wyoming scored are both on the ground from Evan Svoboda. DJ Williams scored one for Southern Illinois in the opener. Those are the only touchdowns. Those are the 3 touchdowns overall through 4 games that BYU has given up. We are watching, man, just absolute masterful play defensively. All right, I'm going to put the 5-layer burrito down while I continue to talk about this, so bear with me for a moment. And by the way, if you're listening to the audio format, I'm legitimately eating a beefy 5-layer burrito. That account, it did tweet out that if Kansas State lost, they would shove one of these up their rear end. And yeah, so by the way, apparently on social media, they paid up on the bet. What a night. What a bloody night for the BYU Cougars. They absolutely trounced the Kansas State Wildcats. Conversation with people about this game is just overwhelmingly positive, and we'll get to your listener comments momentarily, but I wanted to talk first off about what what coaches will tell you is called the middle 8. Well, what is that? It's the 4 minutes before halftime and the 4 minutes coming out of the locker room. Those 8 minutes of game time are considered to be among, if not the most important in any college football game. Coaches up and down the universe of college football will tell you, if your team wins that proverbial middle 8 minutes, more often than not, your team's going to win the football game. BYU, with 2 minutes and 10 seconds to go at halftime, made a 31-yard field goal from Will Farron to make this a 6-3 ball game. Before that, honestly, Kansas State had controlled the overall tenor of this game. They had put together a 12-play drive that covered 57 yards and a 16-play drive that went, I think, 80-some-odd yards, but came away with just 6 points via 2 field goals. BYU goes down the field, gets their defensive break by getting that field goal on that drive. It carved off something like 5 minutes, it felt like. I'd have to look up the exact numbers on it. But the bigger thing is BYU went down the field, got that field goal. 2 minutes and 10 seconds to go in the half. I vividly remember looking at the clock, saying, okay, I got 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Let's see if BYU can get to the locker room down just 3 points. That would be a win in many respects, considering how much of the first half Kansas State had controlled with their overall game plan. Suddenly, they get Dylan Edwards that fumbled that ball. Jack Kelly grabs him, punches the ball out. Tommy Prasis, Tommy on the spot, runs up, scoop and score, runs it in, and just like that, BYU's up 10-6. Kansas State comes right back out. Was it 2 plays later? Tyler Batty drops into a spy technique for Avery Johnson, the fleet-footed quarterback for Kansas State, and Avery Johnson throws it, and Tyler Batty shows off his athleticism by picking that pass off. 2 plays later, Jake Retzlaff hits Chase Roberts in the corner of the end zone, and bada bing, bada boom, 17-6. 39 seconds of game time elapsed between those 2 scores. There was still like a minute to go in the half, and suddenly BYU was up 2 full scores. Then they finish out the half. Kansas State said, you know what, enough is enough. They ran the ball, end the half. Oh, it was maybe 40 seconds to go. End the half, come out of the locker room. BYU kicks it off. Tyler Batty gets probably his best pressure of the season on Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson sidesteps him, steps up into the pocket, throws a pass across the middle of the field, which Harrison Taggart is just standing there in the middle of the field, picks it off. Had he not, Crew Wakely was right there behind him, and likely he gets a chance to pick it off himself. Well, Harrison Taggart gets that, and then Sione Moa motors up the sideline for seemingly 30 yards. I think it was like 24, actually. And Jake Retzlaff then hits Darius Lasser for a touchdown, and boom, game over. 24-6, and that's all she wrote. Good night, Irene, whatever terminology you want to use. That transpired in less than 4 minutes. So, honestly, BYU, that middle 8, it was more like the middle 3 minutes and change. Phenomenal stuff for BYU. I cannot reiterate how impressive a victory this is for BYU. This legitimizes Kalani Sitake and the BYU Cougars nationally. Yes, I know it was a late. Yes, I know that there are a lot of people on the East Coast who probably didn't see it, but they're going to wake up if they did not see this game, look up the box score and say, BYU beat Kansas State 38-9? Wow, what happened there? They need to go back and watch this game. We haven't even talked about Isaiah Glasker tripping up Avery Johnson on a 4th down. We haven't talked about an oh my bleep, oh my bleep, oh my bleep, and then oh my yes type of return for Parker Kingston. It felt like he ran 150 yards on that punt return that he housed. It was a 93-yard return, I think, officially. Picked it up on the 7-yard line. Finds the corner. Isaiah Glasker gets him around the edge, and he's got a convoy of guys in front of him, and he motors up the sideline, scores the touchdown. Almost had a Kalen Clay moment where he dropped the ball, but he actually crossed just by inches, gets the touchdown, and then pukes his guts out on the sideline. I don't know what else to say about this game. It was as thorough a beatdown as you're going to see from a team, speaking of BYU, that mustered 241 total yards of offense. The opposing team, Kansas State, ran for 224 yards. They averaged 5.2 yards per carry, and they mustered 9 points. Kansas State -3 in the margin. BYU 0 turnovers. Really, the only bad throw that Jake Retzlaff had in this game was he had a one-on-one with Pokai Haunga on a Kansas State linebacker that Haunga had to step on his guy, but Jake threw it far out of bounds. There's no chance to even go after that ball for Haunga. That was literally the only bad, quote-unquote, play, and I mean bad relatively, from Jake Retzlaff. 15 of 21, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 71% completion percentage, a QB efficiency rating of 162.5. The QBR from ESPN, 66.2, I think is what it was. Yeah, 66.2. Steady numbers. And where are all the people that don't believe Jake Retzlaff can lead BYU to glory? They're 4-0, everybody. This is a remarkable team. They are night and day, completely different from last season. Last year, in many respects, the 3-0, the 4-1, the 5-2 records they had at different points during that season proved to be fool's gold. The end of the season on a 5-game losing streak. This team this year, they showed that they are a force to be reckoned with. It's really, really fun to see. Now, do we have to readjust expectations? Do we need to reevaluate how far BYU can go this season? Well, that's a conversation we're going to have. We're going to have it momentarily as we roll on right here on a postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season big with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and also do so much more on the same page that you place your bets with our friends at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200. You're right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. $200 bonus bets courtesy of just a $5 bet from our friends at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. If you want to take the over-under, I hope you did it before the season. BYU over-under 4.5 wins. Well, they got 4 already, and you guys are going to cash out if you paid that money already. You can probably get the live number, maybe 6, 7 wins, whatever it is. Go to FanDuel.com and take advantage of it today. If you believe BYU is going to go down to Waco next week and blow the doors off the Bears, take advantage of that and bet on it today. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. And it's all courtesy, once again, of your friends at FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, first view of the day as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, what a win for BYU, to reiterate. Just crazy scenes in Provo as it unfolded last night. And as I mentioned, it was a 6-3 ball game. Kansas State got to the 2-minute timeout. It's supposed to be the 2-minute warning, but whatever, college football. You do whatever you're going to do. And then the game just turned on its head. And Chris Kleiman said after the game that after that collapse at the end of the first half, his team did not respond well. The other thing about this is Avery Johnson, I said it in the preview edition of the podcast on Friday, he has never played in front of a crowd like he was going to face at BYU. He and his teammates crumbled, and I mean crumbled in the final moments of that first half. 4 false starts. The Rock, BYU student section, just absolutely got inside their head. They could not function properly in this game. And I know that fan attendance and the noise and all that stuff, it's not quantifiable how much of an impact it is. But I'm telling you, LaVell Edwards Stadium is severely underrated in terms of what the impact the fans have on opposing teams. Look at Arizona State a few years back. Look at Kansas State in this one. That fan noise, the stadium pulse is what the new term is, what they have from NCAA 25 on the EA Sports platform. It is absolutely remarkable what BYU's been capable of doing. So that brings me to this. BYU is now 4-0 on the season. I said that 6 wins. I said it all offseason long. Those of you who are everydayers and stuck with us through the 9 months we talked about until the season kicked off, heard me reiterate time and time again that I thought 6-6 would be a good enough season for me to quantify it as a success for the BYU football program. 4-0 right now, 6 wins ain't going to do it at this point. You went and beat the number 2 team in the league. The Kansas State was 1 first-place vote behind Utah in the preseason poll. Lowly old BYU was picked 13th in that poll. If you can knock off the number 2 team, number 13 team in the league, by the way, the biggest margin of victory for BYU over a top 15 opponent in their program's history, the biggest unranked over ranked opponent margin of victory of the season in college football to date this year. BYU's doing absolutely remarkable things. What do we need to reevaluate this for? Are we looking at 7, 8 wins conservatively? It sure feels like it at this point. There's still a long way to go. There's 2/3 of the season. It's crazy to consider that we are 1/3 the way through this regular season. But the Cougars are 4-0. They're riding a high. And Kalani Sitake, I got to give him credit. He has been very salty with the media saying, oh, you guys don't believe we're good enough at 3-0? Well, that shows what you guys think. That's what he said on Monday. And I took it as, you know what? This is a guy who's trying to speak to his team and say, nobody believes in you guys. Well, didn't you just go out there and prove yourself and show the nation that BYU's here to play? Last year, West Virginia was picked dead last in the Big 12 and finished with a 9-3 season. Is that what BYU can do this season? Can they be 9-3 and play in a high-level bowl game? Because the fact of the matter is, when BYU gets into bowl games now in the Big 12, it's no longer playing the Shreveport Independence Bowl. It's a chance to play in the Alamo Bowl. It's a chance to play in the Gate. Like, we're talking big-time bowl games that are just like kind of on the periphery of the New Year's Six bowl games with the 12-team playoff. That is the door that's now open to BYU. They still have to go out and win 2 more games to get to bowl eligibility, but it feels at this point, BYU, I think very likely is 5-0 next week heading into a bye week, and then after that you got Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Utah in your next 3 if I recall correctly. There is a lot, everything is on the table for this BYU squad right now. So that brings me back to the point. What is the expectation for BYU? I'm going to say it right now at 4-0, 8-4 is what you got a gun for now. Because Houston is dog crap. Arizona State got kind of exposed a little bit by Texas Tech. I look at Baylor, and I just don't think that they're infinitely beatable because they lost to Colorado. I don't think Colorado's much anything. This is a BYU team that has completely transformed itself in one off season and has gone from bottom tier of the league to what? Easily middle tier right now? The funny thing about this is the state of Utah is running the Big 12 currently. The vaunted Utah Utes, the 12th team in the country, ground out a 22-19 win over Oklahoma State and Stillwater, and props to Kyle Whittingham and his squad. They're 4-0. Guess what? The team they like to say, the TDS, the team down south, they're 4-0 too. They're 1-0 in the conference. The state of Utah runs the Big 12 right now. Can this remain a viable thing where come the Holy War, November 9th, could we get some national attention? Could we get a big noon Saturday? Could we get a college game day to Provo, Utah at some point this season? All of that's out there, but the only thing you can do if you're BYU is ignore the noise and go out and do your job. We're seeing remarkable things from this BYU team right now. It's a BYU offensive line that is rounding into form. Caleb Etienne, remember, he was the most hated man amongst BYU fans last year. He seemingly could not play a lick out there on BYU's offensive line. He has been so solid at left tackle, he's a non-story. Consider that. Consider what that it means for a guy like that. He went from being a guy who just couldn't get out of the public eye in terms of just the baffling display we saw from him last season, and now he is so good that I'm expecting he's probably going to be drafted next year. What a remarkable turnaround that is. What a remarkable turnaround this BYU defense is having. Jack Kelly, I said earlier this week that he's number 5 on Mel Kiper's outside linebackers list. What he showed against Kansas State should push him even higher on that list. How much higher can he and the BYU defense climb? They're conservatively a top 15 defense in my mind right now in the country, and the metrics back that up. I think they were in the teens in terms of overall defense. I know that rushing defense number will go down because you have 224 yards, so be it. And I know that there's still going to be questions around the BYU offense because it was a fairly pedestrian output, 241 yards. I get that, but you didn't need to do much. When you have the contributions literally in all 3 phases of this game for BYU, Kalani talks about it. He wants to see complementary football. The game against Kansas State was exactly what he's been looking for some time. I am expecting Kalani Sitake, he won't admit to this, but I would expect that Kalani Sitake is sitting back thinking, that's what I talk about when I talk about wanting to play complementary football. Have all 3 phases of the game contributing. Punt return for a touchdown, a scoop and score from your defense, an offense that made the opposing team pay for their mistakes, 2 interceptions, and then two two-play drives immediately afterwards for touchdowns. We haven't even talked about Sione Moa and him emerging. Is he the next Tyler Algier, a walk-on who emerged seemingly out of nowhere to become a stud running back for BYU? Now, I will also acknowledge that BYU has not got LJ Martin available right now, but Sione Moa stepped up and answered the bell and has become the new leading running back for BYU. Miles Davis' time is done. It's crazy to consider that, but Miles Davis was relegated to a bench role for BYU in this game. Enoch Nawahine, the same thing. Sione Moa came in, and I think he's making a push to have Sione Moa on the defensive side have to go by his middle initial versus Sione having to go by the middle initial. It should be Sione Moa, the running back, and I remember what Sione Moa on defense, what his middle initial is. But it's absolutely remarkable what this team is accomplishing right now. And yes, we need to reset expectations. It absolutely has to be reset now. 4-0, it feels like it's a foregone conclusion. They're going to get to 6 wins. And I'll say, 6 wins for me would have been enough for me to consider the season a success. But now that we're 4 games in and BYU's 4-0 and riding high, yeah, it needs to change. It needs to go up. The level of expectation needs to go up. I can tell you this BYU team, they had goals. They wanted to win a national championship. They want to win a conference title. Well, guess what? They are controlling the controllable. The controllable is keep winning football games. Keep doing what you're doing. Lean on a generational type defense. Have we seen really this defense since some of the great defenses during Bronco Mendenhall's run at BYU? I don't think I'm out of the realm of possibility of saying that. Jay Hill, with what he's done with his BYU defense, is going to be a hot coaching commodity on the open market here coming as soon as this offseason. Who knows if he wants to stick around BYU for another year to really see what he can accomplish, or if he's like, you know what? I did my job. See you guys. I'm off to the next thing. It's remarkable how quickly things have turned around in Provo. I am hearing very little chatter after this game about Jake Retzlaff isn't the guy. It should be Gary Bohan. None of that nonsense is going on. Aaron Roderick needs to be fired. No, I'm not hearing Aaron Roderick. Kalani Sitake's on the hot. No, he's not on the hot seat. All of that conversation has died down, and it's died down in one month of football. It's a crazy, crazy sport. It's an oblong ball that bounces really, really weird ways. But the good news is, if you're a Cougar fan, the Cougars have superseded all expectations to this point, and they are poised to do some really, really cool things this year. I think they truly are the surprise team of the Big 12 so far. There's no doubt about that. They're sitting tied atop the conference right now. They're undefeated. Did any of you, in your heart of hearts, have BYU sitting at 4-0 at this point in the season? If you did, I want you to go put money for me down on next year's record because you're Nostradamus, and I'm going to take your money to the bank. Crazy, crazy times. And yeah, the conversation, let us know in the comments below. What should the expectations now be for BYU? Maybe you had sky high expectations coming into the year. Maybe you thought BYU was going to go 9-3, and props to you. I said 6 wins was the benchmark for me. Well, it's time to reset those expectations. And there's still a long ways to go. There's 8 more conference games, and these are going to be absolute wars. They are going to beat each other up. Look no further than a lot of these scores in the Big 12. They are some low-scoring affairs. They're slugfest performances because they got elite defense across this league. BYU's one of many, many good defenses in this league, and the offenses are going to be challenged to score against them. It starts next week with Baylor. I think Baylor's got a pretty salty defense. I think their offense is inept, but their defense has proven to be pretty solid with Dave Aranda calling the plays. And they're going to have to solve that riddle when BYU goes on the road at Baylor next week. But we'll break that down as the week progresses here on the podcast. All right. Enough of me bloviating on and just having fun with a BYU win. I got a burrito here that's getting cold, so we got to wrap up this edition of the podcast so I can finish it before I fall asleep at, we're looking at 2:10 a.m. All right, sweet. Let's go. All right, more in a moment. Your guys' comments as we finish up this postcast edition of Locked On Cougars right here on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, if you guys want to go out to any event you want to go to, maybe it's a next BYU home game. Game Time has got the tickets for you guys. That's the best part about this. No matter what you like to do, sporting events, concerts, movie, theaters, whatever you're into, they've got the options for you guys, and they have a brand new feature in their app called Game Time Picks. Makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through all the other listings to find the right option for you. The best part I love about this app is a lot of us have bought tickets to an event. You get to the payment screen, all of a sudden you're seeing just a layer of fees, 15 gazillion of them it feels like. You're like, hey, my price just went up significantly. You can toggle this in the app. They call it the all-in pricing feature. You toggle it in the app, and it'll show you exactly what you're paying right up front. There's no additional fees being tacked on at the end that surprise you. You can see exactly what it's going to be, fees included inside the app. They've got special deals all the time. They got their Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. They'll credit you up to 110% back if you find better tickets. It's their Game Time guarantee, the lowest price guarantee, excuse me, what I should call it. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets today and go to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. I'm going fast because it's Locked On College for $20 off your purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, now is as good a time as any to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. You want all the intel I'm hearing coming out of BYU? Well, guess what? Our Insiders Group is the only group that gets that from me. I have made it exclusive to our Insiders Group. Injury reports, what I'm hearing about the BYU team going into game days, all that intel. You can get it. Click the link in the show notes below. Join us today. It's a 14-day free trial, just $5 a month afterwards, to get all that inside scoop, and it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. It does not get much more direct than that, and hope you guys will be joining us very, very soon on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, great comments here. Now, I got an interesting one. I want to get this out of the way real quick from Paul Nielsen. Now, Paul has a very interesting point here. He says they played up tight in the first quarter. The scoop and score is what turned this game. The defense is really good in the red zone. Retzlaff got better as the game went on. He made some elite throws. He said not to take anything away away from this win because it is a great win. Other than the 2 short fields that the offense got from the 2 interceptions, the offense only had 2 sustained drives this game. That needs to improve. Well, I can see what you're saying, Paul, but here's the deal. Celebrate the win! I don't mean to out you, Paul, because I don't be a negative Nancy in this situation. That was a heck of a win for the BYU Cougars. Do not take away from how impressive that was. Yes, BYU does need to sustain more drives, but really, this game was over before it really had a chance to have those quote-unquote sustained drives. Kansas State ate up a ton of the time of possession in the first and second quarters with those 2 long drives that they had. BYU just kept touchdown, and that game was out of reach, and Southern Kansas State's like, you know what, let's pack it up, boys, we're flying back to Manhattan, we'll just tuck our tails between the legs. It was a really, really tough loss for them to absorb, but it was a thorough beating from BYU. Yes, I understand what you're saying about wanting more sustained drives, but this was not that game that I think to complain about that, because really, BYU was salting the game away at that point, and that was the biggest thing about this. Matt Moon, I got to give Retzlaff credit. I have been on the Gary train from the start, but Jake played amazingly well tonight. Hey, converting people. Matt's jumping over to the Jake train. Welcome. Let's see here. Mark Parrish, how interesting is it in the last year's 4th game at Kansas? I was there. I watched this one played. He says this. The huge and catastrophic play of that game was Parker Kingston's fumble that resulted in a scoop and score. And can you juxtapose that with this game where Parker Kingston fumbled the punt return, they instead turned into one of the great punt returns in BYU history? What a difference a year makes. I hadn't even thought about that, Mark. That is an incredible point you make there. 4 games into last season, Parker Kingston took a monster shot against Kansas. Kobe Bryant, I remember Kobe Bryant just lit him up, scooped it up, ran it in for a touchdown in that game. It set the tenor for that game against Kansas. BYU would go on to lose. And you mentioned it, a year later, he gets redemption against Kansas's vaunted rival, the Kansas State Wildcats, even in a bigger circumstance. You mentioned, it was like he fumbled that return, you're like, no, and then all of a sudden he turns the corner, like, oh my goodness, what could he do here? You're right. What a difference a year makes. Juxtapose those 2 things. What a redemption story it is for Connor Pay out of that. Jimmy says this, BYU didn't just win, they beat the absolute hell out of K-State in all 3 facets of the game. Number 2, Sione Moa is a total stud. And number 3, I'm going to have a stomachache from all the crow I have to eat about Jake Retzlaff. Welcome, Jimmy. Welcome. The crow tastes fine, let me tell you. He also says this. Oh, and one last thing. Hey, Big 12. Welcome to BYU football. I butchered that. Okay, let's do that again. 3, 2, 1. Oh, and one last thing. Hey, Big 12. Welcome to BYU football. You're not wrong, Jimmy. Enjoy that crow. I think you and many others are going to be eating that crow. Jaden, this defense is different. They stand up when it matters. I'm on the 8-win train. Oh, also, all capital letters. Sione Moa. Yeah, really cool. I'm telling you. Tyler Algier, remember, he was a preferred walk-on with the BYU football program, played defense just to get on the field as a freshman for BYU. Well, Sione Moa is a walk-on from Timpview High School, and as a true freshman, he is starting to show out. What an incredible story it is. Do we have our next Tyler Algier out there? It's incredible to consider that, but only time will tell on this. Alex, was this a dream? Question mark, exclamation point, exclamation. I'm not even sure this is real. I don't think you're alone in this. It was absolutely incredible how quickly that game turned and how quickly it was over, quite literally. 4 or 5 minutes of game time, and it went from Kansas State is grinding the BYU into a pulp, and all of a sudden BYU's running away with a laugher. It's incredible. Let's see. Gary Gabriel. Turnovers are the name of the game. I am still in shock at the final score, but very pleased. I agree with you on that. John, didn't see that big of a win. Poor bettors tonight. Liv Moss indeed. Hey, there's that burrito, baby. I'm excited to polish this bad boy off in a minute. Carter Harrison, top 15 defense in the nation. Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Brian Jones, Retzlaff played well, looked good. I agree with that. Question is this a different team than last year? Has definitely been answered. That comes from Weston. Great point, Weston. It has absolutely been answered. This is truly a different team. Christy, I threw it out on our Locked On Cougars Insider group to put your predictions out there. I bet nobody was close to this score. I'm going to have to go back through. I think I had something around 70 different predictions. I'm guessing the winner who gets bragging rights is going to be a little far off from the score. I agree with Christy there. Man, I got so many comments here, so apologies. I'm not going to get through all of these before we got to wrap up here. Luke, BYU's defense is elite. Forced 3 turnovers and kept Avery Johnson under check for the most part. Also, and I got to pull this up here. I kind of got cut off here as I look at it. Oh, also massive props to BYU's offense to turn the turnovers into touchdowns rather than field goals. Kept Kansas State from salvaging any momentum in those situations. You're right. Good teams will make you pay when you make mistakes. BYU did that. 2 interceptions, 4 plays, 2 touchdowns. All 3 of the turnovers that Kansas State had in this game, 21 points off of them. That is exactly what you want to do. Good teams will do that to you. They will punish you for your mistakes once again. It is absolutely insane to consider this. Bud Todd, what a game. You're not wrong about this. Tyson, my favorite observation of the night was that the players' posture after this game. They didn't look particularly surprised that they won. They expected it. Maybe the team culture actually is beginning to change. Similarly, I love that the fans didn't storm the field. We signaled to K-State and the rest of the Big 12 that beating ranked opponents is not something that we are surprised by. I love it. I actually was surprised that no BYU fans stormed the field because remember, a couple of years ago, BYU beat, I think it was Baylor was 10th when they came to Provo. And remember, BYU won that game in overtime and BYU. And I know the overtime and the beatdown nature are 2 different feelings, but I was surprised there wasn't necessarily so many fans on the field after the game. Brian Rhodes, I am blown away. It's just... Tyson, BYU's defense is for real. Our offense is also coming together. Guys are stepping up where they are needed. Will BYU be ranked? I hope so, but I also look at this. I look at this because there's just such a late night, and there's so many East Coast voters who wake up and read box scores that I don't know they get ranked. I will happily eat crow if they are, and we'll talk about it on our Monday edition of the show, but it's been a fun night. So I'm going to wrap it up there. It just, like I said, I've got, considerably 100+ different takes coming in via Twitter as well as on our Locked On Cougars Insider group. So it's been a really, really fun night. And I got to say, what a win. What a showing for BYU. And they have absolutely changed their mentality. Oh, I'm going to finish off with this. This is actually really good. Justin Clayton, he has the final word here. Justin says this: I've been saying it all week. BYU fans have an identity crisis. Here he says this: losing to Utah has broken too many fans. We should expect to win games like this, speaking as a BYU fan. This is who we are, speaking of BYU. We are the road game that makes everybody nervous. We are the stadium that creates penalties. Hashtag Blue Blood. I like that. Justin, you get the final word. All right. Whew. All right, time to finish off this burrito. So a big thank you, as always, for your support of the podcast. I met some of the BYU facilities crew. I believe they were in the facilities crew up in the press box tonight. Said they listen every single day. It literally makes my day every time people stop me. If you see me out there in the wild and you are gun shy and don't want to say hello, please do. It means the world to me when you guys say hi. I just want to put that as the final stanza on this podcast. You guys make this thing go. This is why I do what I do. I had somebody tell me last night, Jake, I don't know how you've done this podcast every weekday for 6 straight years. Sometimes I question it as well. But games like tonight, they make it easy. So big win for BYU, 4-0, hopefully going to be ranked, and now headed to Waco, Texas to face off against the Baylor Bears. They should be 5-0. I'll say that right now. They should be 5-0 this time next week, but we'll break that down as the week progresses coming up right here on the podcast. So as always, number one, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view or listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being everydayers as well. And until Monday, tomorrow, because most of you are going to see this on Sunday. Until tomorrow, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.